So, yeah, we started making reality keys back in, I think it was about 2013. This was, I think, at the time, the first smart contract oracle out there. And we found a couple of things that surprised us. One was that we thought that a lot of the data people wanted we could just grab off websites, and that we just needed to translate web feeds into something that the blockchain could read. But we found that, in fact, a lot of the questions that people needed, they didn't really have good APIs for. And another thing we found that we expected, that, I mean, the canonical case for this stuff was kind of prediction markets. But we found that, in fact, there's a long tail of really interesting data that you want to have on the blockchain for stuff like, OK, I've done my ICO, I've raised some money, have I met this milestone? I shouldn't be able to actually spend that money until I start hitting my milestones. So let me just back up a little bit about the Oracle problem in general before I talk about what we've built. Where do I need to point this? Next. No. Any suggestions here? OK. OK, we're good. So yeah, the two main problems that kind of comprise the Oracle problem. The first is, how do you get anyone on the blockchain to tell you the truth? And this is the interesting part and the crazy hard part. This is what Augur has made an awesome attempt to do. We have also some interesting proposals to do that. But today I want to talk mainly about what we've built that you can immediately build on as soon as we release on mainnet at the end of the month. And that mainly focuses on the second problem, which is how to make it fast and cheap and socially scalable. And what we found is that if we can make it fast and cheap and socially scalable, that makes it much easier to solve the hard problem. So this is what we were trying to build. We wanted to be able to handle any question with a publicly available answer, pretty much. So any question that your contract wants to know the answer to, it should just be able to ask our contract, and we should be able to answer you. We wanted to make it fast. We wanted to make it cheap. Where there's something expensive going on, like dispute resolution, we wanted liars and idiots to fund that. We don't want honest, sensible people to fund that. We wanted to keep the gas cost low. And we didn't want to use any funny tokens for this. We want to just use the thing with Ether, so that if you've got a contract calling our contract to get some information, you don't need to worry about buying Realitio tokens or something. So this is what we've built. This is our DApp. It's currently live on Rinkeby. It'll be going live on mainnet, scheduled for the end of this month. It's based on this fairly simple economic game. So what happens is that anybody can ask a question, and if they want to, they can set up a reward that's payable for that question. They don't have to. Sometimes you don't need to, but if you want to, you can. When you answer a question, you post a bond. And posting that bond and setting that answer sets a clock ticking until it times out, and it takes your answer as the final answer. What we then do is anybody can come along and they can change the answer, but when they change the answer, they have to double the bond. So we're going to escalate pretty quickly. Doubling the bond will also reset the clock. So it's then going to tick down again until either nobody answers, or you're probably thinking, what happens if somebody comes along with some huge Ether stash and just puts a load of money on some obviously wrong answer? We obviously don't want that to be the final answer. And we don't want that to claim the bonds of the people who have given the good answers. So what we do there is we have this backstop, which is our arbitrator contract. And I'll talk a bit in a second about the actual mechanisms that we can use to power this arbitrator contract. But it's designed so that you can just plug it in, switch it out, and use whatever is working for you. So anybody can pay this contract. They have to send what we think is going to be a fairly hefty fee, certainly thousands of dollars, potentially tens of thousands of dollars, to request arbitration. Now, we don't want somebody honest to really have to shoulder this cost. But what they can do is, if they just keep on putting up bigger bonds, and some liar keeps up putting on bigger bonds, you can wait until their bond is high enough that correcting the final answer will allow you to claim that bond from them, and you'll be able to make a profit. So you pay the arbitrator, that freezes the question, and then the arbitrator sends their final answer. Now, anybody can make an arbitrator contract, and I'll tell you a little bit about the options here. Unfortunately, they're all terrible. This is kind of the state of the Oracle problem right now, is that all we have is either trusted parties or sort of complex game theoretical stuff that may not work. That's the truth of the situation. Augur is shipped and it's awesome. We don't know if it works yet. But so here's what we can use. We can use a trusted party, and obviously we don't like using trusted parties. It feels kind of icky. But for a lot of use cases, this is actually going to be the best option. Secondly, of the various crypto-economic things that we can try, there are shelling games, the kind of thing that Kleros is working on. And I heard a rumor that Kleros are going to have at least some of their stuff shipped at the end of this month too. So it might be possible to make a little Kleros connector that would allow Kleros to do arbitration. Subjectivocracy is the thing that I'd really like to talk about today, and I don't have time. But I spoke about this at DevCon last year, and at the end of the presentation, I'll just put up a link so that you can see that talk if you're interested. And finally, you can use Augur like a parasite. If you read the Augur white paper, there's something rather striking, which is this. Parasitic markets, that's markets or uses of Augur that don't actually trade on Augur and don't actually issue shares on Augur, but just use Augur as an information source. Those markets have the potential to threaten the long-term viability of Augur and should be vehemently opposed, is what it says in the white paper. But there's no actual mechanism there to vehemently oppose these parasitic markets. And the reason why the Augur developers are worried about these markets is that Augur is set up with the security assumption that people won't have more money riding on bets on Augur than the total token value of their rep token. And if that assumption is violated, then in theory it becomes insecure. So they work quite hard to actually price people out of their system if it looks like there are too many open bets and too much open interest. But if you start using Augur just to grab random facts to power your contracts, and your contracts have some money attached to them, they can't control that, and it's putting this security burden on Augur, but it's not actually creating any value for their token holders. So there's this kind of weird situation where we can do this, we can build this stuff, it'll potentially work really well, but it's a kind of a free rider problem. Maybe a tragedy of the commons, it may destroy Augur. And the guy who wrote the Truthcoin white paper that Augur was based on thinks that this whole thing is not viable because of parasites. But, you know, I mean, one person's free rider problem is somebody else's free rider opportunity. So you may well think, well, you know, we can use it. It's right there. It'll work great, so let's do it. So let's just look at a few of the different choices we have here for arbitration. We can use Realitio with a trusted arbitrator. Obviously, we hate that, but it will sometimes work. It's not trustless, but it'll be dead cheap to ask a question. Not a lot of gas. Can resolve very quickly, if that's what you need. You can do it just with Ether, and it should be out at the end of this month. It doesn't do anything to Augur, doesn't even talk to Augur. Or you can go straight to Augur as your data source. So if you're not trading on your markets, you're a parasite of the Augur system. It's trustless, which is awesome. It's a little bit expensive just to create a question, because in Augur, creating a question means creating a market, which deploys its own contract. It's, you know, 2.5 million gas to do that bit, and the other bits are also quite slow, quite expensive. It takes a while to resolve. It's designed for accuracy and not for speed. You have to put in some of their rep token as well as the Ether token, but it's already live and it's great. But doing this, as I say, potentially destroys their system. Or you can do this. You can use Realitio, but you can use Augur as your arbitrator. And the great thing about this is it's just as trustless, just as secure as using Augur directly. It's much cheaper to ask a question. You can adjust it to the speed that you need. You only need to feed in Ether. It'll need a little connector contract to do this. If anyone wants to do this, like, I don't know if you should do this or not, but if anyone wants to, I'll help them. So you know, it's very simple to get going. But as I say, it's bad for Augur. Finally, there's the design that we're working on, subjectivocracy, which I'll give you a link to at the end. This is, I think, a really interesting, nice trustless solution. You'll have all the features of Realitio in terms of low cost and speed. But the downside is it'll use the weirdest token that you've ever come across in your life. So do please, if you're interested, listen to the video at the end of the talk. So OK, let me get down to actually using the thing. So the simplest thing that you can do is just go to our web UI, put in your question. And that'll give you the ID of that question, and you can use that question ID to set up your contract. So if it's a bet, you would say you're going to set up a contract that says if this ID resolves to this answer, then you get the money, and if it's this answer, then he gets the money. So it's a very simple call. You say get final answer, passing that question ID, and we will either give you that final answer as a bytes 32, or we will just throw an error if it's not yet resolved. You may want to ask the question yourself from your contract or from your JavaScript code. You can do that something like this. What we're doing here is we're putting in a template ID, which I'll talk a bit about in a second, the text of your question, the arbitrator that you've chosen, the timeout period, that's how long you'll have after posting an answer before the clock runs out and it finalizes on that, and then a couple more parameters I won't bother you with. Sometimes you have a question that will kind of boil down to lots of potential questions. So if I want to know if my office has burnt down, my office didn't burn down yesterday and it didn't burn down the day before, but maybe it burned down today. And if you're making, say, an insurance contract on has my office burnt down, then you don't care at all those times that it didn't burn down. You only care about the time that it did burn down. So what you can do there is you can just let somebody else put that question into the Realitio system and then say to your contract, look, here's this question ID which proves that the Realitio office has burnt down, so you should pay me my money. So I'll just say a little bit about how the questions are formatted. This is stuff that the contract doesn't know anything about. This is just what the DApp knows about. So there's a lump of JSON there. It lives on the event logs of the blockchain. To avoid using too much gas asking these repeated questions, we separate it into these two parts. You've got a template, which is a reusable part of this question, and then you've got the parameters. So for a simple Boolean question, we just have a very simple template like this that just has a title and a category. If you want to do, let's say, a flight insurance application, then you're asking the same question repeatedly, probably. So you might want to say, was flight, whatever flight number, on date, whatever date, delayed by more than 3 hours. And you want to ask that over and over again for different flights and different dates. So you make your own template like that, and then you can just pass in the parameters when you use it. So again, you'll have this very low gas cost when you ask the actual questions. So let me say a little bit about things that will potentially not work well with this system. This assumes that the blockchain is available, and that if you put in a wrong answer, somebody can get to the blockchain and change that to a correct answer. Now, what's particularly bad about this is that the person who is trying to trick the system, the person who is trying to get a lie past the system, controls the timing, right? So potentially, if they know there's some very badly designed ICO starting at midnight, what they can do is they can come in and put their answer in right before midnight, and then the people trying to correct that answer have then got to fight against all this traffic to get the correct answer in. So all we can really do there is that we've done whatever we can to make the cost of correcting an answer extremely cheap in terms of gas. It's only about 50,000 gas. And you just have to hope that the blockchain generally stays up. And this is also true for a lot of these kind of second layer systems, that also true for things like Plasma and all these other systems that depend on challenges getting to the blockchain. That you need the blockchain to be up and working. And if it's not, then that availability problem that the blockchain has turns into a security problem for your application. Another problem we have is ambiguous answers with a lot of different options. So the way that you challenge an answer is by putting in the correct answer. But if you've got 10 answers and there's all a 10% chance of any of them being correct, then you don't really want to challenge an answer by putting in another answer. So it works much better with questions that have actually resolved themselves and that don't have a lot of possible answers. Finally, the kind of tricksy questions and questions with information hidden in between rounds. So, for example, you might put in a question that everyone is going to think the answer is A, and then you let them put bonds on the idea that the answer is A, You put up some bonds on the idea that the answer is B, and then you publish your devastatingly effective Medium post, which explains why, in fact, the answer is B. And that would allow you, of course, assuming the arbitrator would also, if asked, would rule in your favor, that will allow you to take these bonds of these person who was trying to be honest and trying to do the right thing. And actually, this problem is bad for us, and it's even worse for Augur, because Augur, as their final dispute, have this very disruptive process that actually literally stops you resolving the existing markets and stops you creating new markets. So this is another place where you can see the parasites that use Realitio would actually, in a way, be a lot better than, from the point of view of the end user, than the actual native markets on Augur. Because if Augur gets into this situation where everything's stopped, the Realitio markets that are only using Augur as a backstop are actually still working. So it's a slightly weird system with situation with parasitism. So, OK, so that's what we've built. I've put a little bit more information up here, and I've put my talk from last year at DevCon about subject democracy, which I hope if you haven't seen it, you will have a chance to read. It's an absolutely fascinating topic, and we'll get working on that once this thing is out and stabilized. OK, I hope this will be useful, and I hope you can build stuff. If you need any help, jump on the Discord channel that's linked there, and we can see what you can do for you. OK.